Number 9. Vitale Tchaikovsky. Vitale Tchaikovsky and his fiancée, 22-year-old Anastasia Kovaleva, were spending the day together at a beach in Ukraine in 2019 when he allegedly got angry at her for showing off her body in front of other men. The couple argued afterward, and it reached a boiling point when Anastasia told Vitale that their relationship was going nowhere and broke up with him. Vitale doused Anastasia in gasoline and set her ablaze at the entrance to her apartment, leaving her with burns to 90% of her body. She turned into a fireball, according to witnesses, who also reported hearing horrific screams. Neighbors were able to put the fire out with a blanket, but Anastasia died 8 days later in the hospital. He bought the gasoline ahead of time, indicating that the crime was premeditated, at least on some level. But he argued in court that Anastasia's death was an accident, saying that he only meant to scare her into not breaking up with him. Vitale was charged with murder. Anastasia's friends claimed that Vitale was extremely controlling and that he tried to dictate her every move. They also said that he read every message on her phone, constantly accused her of flirting with other men, and even made her quit her job as a waitress, which she really enjoyed. Vitale Tchaikovsky was found guilty of murder and received a 15-year prison sentence. Number 8. Luis Lima. 26-year-old Alida Ferreira was a new mom when she was brutally killed in the southeastern Brazilian state of São Paulo in 2022. Her last moments were captured by an elevator surveillance camera and show an unsuspecting Ferreira on her way back to the couple's apartment. Minutes later, neighbors heard gunshots, but nobody reported it. Not long after that, surveillance footage captured Ferreira's boyfriend, 44-year-old MMA fighter Luis Lima, wheeling her body out of the building on a laundry cart, covered in sheets. Hours later, at the crack of dawn, Lima was seen driving off in his car with Ferreira's body inside. He dumped her remains in a nearby stream. Lima returned to the apartment hours later with he and Ferreira's 6-month-old son. He tried to cover up his role in her death by reporting her missing, claiming that she had recently gone out of town to visit family. But the ruse didn't last for very long. A few days later, police found the young woman's plastic-wrapped body in the stream. Authorities speculated that Lima killed Ferreira out of jealousy, despite his claims that he searched everywhere for her and had no idea what happened to her. The case is ongoing. Number 7. Sahil Kazemi. Former NFL quarterback Steve McNair rose to fame during the late 90s. He had a successful 13-season career that lasted until his retirement in 2008. At the time, he was with his wife of 11 years, Michelle McNair, and they had 4 kids together. McNair split his time between Nashville, Tennessee, and the family's farm in Mississippi. Little did Michelle know, McNair had a 20-year-old mistress named Sahil Jenny Kasimi, who fled Iran for the US as a teenager several years earlier. The pair met while Jenny was working as a waitress. She had recently split from a previous boyfriend, and soon enough McNair was showering her with lavish vacations and gifts, including a Cadillac Escalade SUV. But that wasn't enough for Jenny, who wanted to be the main woman in McNair's life. She even told her family and friends that he was going to leave his wife and marry her. Despite her wishes, McNair wasn't interested in having Jenny as anything other than a side chick, and her jealousy became an issue. She became even more unhinged when she began suspecting McNair of having another mistress behind her back. In the meantime, she felt like her control over her own life was unraveling. Her roommate had recently moved out, leaving her stuck paying an extra $1,000 per month in rent, and while McNair covered the down payment for the Escalade, she was responsible for the monthly payments on the car note. After seeing another woman leaving McNair's apartment, she began stalking the woman. 6 months into their illicit relationship, in the early morning hours of July 4th, 2009, Jenny fatally shot McNair in the temple while he slept on the couch inside his Nashville apartment. She fired 3 more bullets and sat next to him on the sofa and took her own life, falling into her slain lover's lap and then onto the floor. Her decision to end both their lives sadly proved to be a permanent solution to what were most likely temporary problems. Number 6. Vincenzo Paruano. 22-year-old Sarah de Pierantonio cried out for help from an Italian roadside one day in 2016. but nobody stopped. She was in the middle of a terrifying argument with her jealous ex-boyfriend, 27-year-old Vincenzo Paruano, who was outraged by her new relationship with another man. Paruano had followed Pier Antonio after she left her new boyfriend's house. He rammed his vehicle into her car, disabling it in the middle of the road, and violently confronted her. Paruano doused De Pier Antonio's car with alcohol and lit it on fire. De Pier Antonio managed to escape the burning vehicle, but Paruano caught up with her. She was covered in alcohol, and he flicked a lighter in her face, causing her to also erupt into flames. The young woman died from her injuries, something prosecutors said could have been prevented if at least one of the two passing motorists who ignored her cries for help had pulled over. But the ultimate responsibility for her death fell on Paruano, who apparently couldn't cope with his feelings of abandonment and rage following their breakup. Number 5. Camille Ranaseck. 42-year-old Camille Ranaseck and 27-year-old Ilona Golubec shared a home in Lincolnshire, England, where they were raising their young child together. But the pair were estranged, and in late 2021, Ilona gave Camille 2 weeks to move out and find somewhere else to live. Soon after that, Camille discovered that Ilona was talking with other men on Tinder and that she planned to meet up with one of them for drinks. Overcome with rage, he brutally attacked her with a hammer and bludgeoned her to death, while their 3-year-old daughter was asleep. Camille struck Ilona at least 7 times in the head. Once he knew she was dead, he undressed her, put her clothes into containers, and put the containers into a cupboard. He then cut his estranged lover's body into at least 15 pieces and disposed of some of the parts in various places throughout a nearby park, while hiding the rest of her body in their bathroom. After discarding Ilona's remains, he rode his bike to the police station and reported her missing. In the meantime, he called her cell phone to make it appear as if he was genuinely concerned about her well-being. Members of the public soon discovered her butchered remains, and Camille was charged with murder 2 weeks after she disappeared. During a search of his flat, investigators found the rest of Ilona's decomposing remains. They also found the containers filled with Ilona's blood-stained clothing. Her torso was never recovered. In court, Camille's defense attorney argued that he meant to cause grievous bodily harm, but that he had no intention to kill her. The judge didn't buy these claims, and he was found guilty of murder with intent. He was sentenced to life in prison. Number 4. Edward Williams. In what infamously became known as Jacksonville, Florida's first murder of 2016, 41-year-old father of 3 Michael Daniels was shot dead outside his home in the middle of the night, just minutes into the new year. Authorities quickly zeroed in on 37-year-old Edward LaRon Williams as their prime suspect. Daniels was dating the mother of Williams' kids, leading investigators to theorize that Williams murdered the victim in a cold-blooded, jealous rage. They learned that shortly before the shooting, Williams told a friend that Daniels was standing in his way of getting back together with the woman and said that he planned to kill the victim. Hours before the murder, Daniels' mother heard a knock at the door of the family's home, but answered the door to find nobody standing there. She said she looked out a window and saw a man walking away. A little while later, Daniels and his girlfriend, Williams' ex, arrived home from church. Shortly before midnight, Daniels heard a knock at the door and went outside to investigate. Nobody was there, but someone shot at him. He called the police and filed a report. He went back outside to use his phone a little while later, and someone fired 2 shots at him. Daniels came stumbling back inside with a gunshot wound to his chest, and he died shortly thereafter. Authorities charged Williams with murder and being a felon in possession of a firearm, which most likely didn't do him any favors when it came to winning back his ex. Number 3. Jack Sutton. 23-year-old Cynthia Dolgiova and 24-year-old Jack Sutton met in the Czech Republic in 2020 and began dating shortly thereafter. In early 2021, the couple moved to Scarborough, England, with plans to stay there for 2 months before continuing on to Germany. But they ran into visa complications, so they extended their stay. Things took a dark turn 4 months after the pair arrived in England when Dolgiova discovered that Sutton had cheated on her. He convinced her not to end the relationship by threatening to hurt himself if she left. In the meantime, it became increasingly clear that the relationship was toxic. Sutton banned Dolgiova from speaking with her best friend because he was suspicious that their friendship was somehow encouraging Cynthia to talk to her ex-boyfriend. He also refused to meet her friends and family and frequently accused her of cheating. Dolgiova finally gathered up the strength to walk away from Sutton, or to at least try, but he talked her into meeting up for dinner to talk one night, and when she wasn't looking, he snatched her ID. Cynthia noticed it was missing later that night when she went to have drinks with a friend, and she reached out to Sutton, asking him to return it. They arranged to meet on a dark street, where Sutton stabbed Dolgiova 11 times. She narrowly escaped with her life. In hindsight, she realized how abusive Sutton's behavior was, but, as they say, love is blind, and the saying certainly applied in this case. Cynthia wanted to believe that Sutton was a good person, so she put her blinders on and convinced herself that he was. Sutton was found guilty of attempted murder and will spend at least 16 years in prison before he even has a chance at seeing freedom again. Number 2. Els Klottemans. In a bizarre tragedy that became known as the parachute murder, a 26-year-old Belgian elementary school teacher named Els Klottemans found herself entangled in a love triangle in 2006. She became insanely jealous when she began to compete with a 38-year-old married mom named Els van Doren for the affections of their skydiving classmate Marcel Sommers. Klottemans and van Doren were initially friends, but Klottemans became overwhelmed with rage one night when van Doren slept in Sommers' bed at his house while she slept on a mattress downstairs. As it turned out, both women were having a relationship with Sommers, but it wasn't until that night that they both realized it. Unable to handle the thought of van Doren and Sommers being romantic together, Klottemans rigged van Doren's parachutes to malfunction in mid-air. Both her primary and reserve parachutes both failed to deploy, sending her plunging to her death from an altitude of more than 2 miles, 3.2 kilometers in the sky. Based on the evidence, police determined that the lines to the parachute had been deliberately cut. Prosecutors presented almost no forensic evidence at trial, but all signs pointed toward Klottemans' guilt, including her attempt at taking her own life after she fell under suspicion for murder. She was ultimately convicted of murder and received a 30-year prison sentence. Klottemans appealed the ruling, but it was upheld. Number 1. Cordelia Farrell. 36-year-old father of 3 Wayne Coventry was brutally stabbed to death at his brother's home in Worcestershire, England, in October 2019. He and his girlfriend, 38-year-old Cordelia Farrell, were arguing in front of family and friends when she grabbed a kitchen knife out of a butcher block, raised the blade over her head, and plunged it deep into his chest. It went straight into his aorta. Farrell fled the scene, sparking a major manhunt across the region. She turned herself into police 5 days later and was charged with murder. Just weeks before the murder, Farrell had allegedly bitten Coventry's privates, indicating that her violent behavior was an ongoing problem in the relationship. During the fight, she grabbed his crotch and dragged him around their apartment. When officers arrived, they found Coventry bleeding from facial injuries, and he showed them the damage she did to him below the belt. She was arrested after the incident and reportedly told police that either she or Coventry would end up dead. During Farrell's murder trial, detectives testified that Coventry's injuries at the scene of the stabbing were so severe that he didn't stand a chance. Jurors listened as witnesses described the 2.5-year relationship as toxic and characterized by violence and jealousy. Some people even accused Farrell of saying ahead of time that she planned to murder Coventry. Prosecutors classified the deadly stabbing as an act of revenge or retaliation for a previous incident. They also mentioned how she tried to rile him up by showing him YouTube videos of her ex-boyfriend, and she apparently got angry when it didn't have the intended effect. Despite the horrifying details of the crime, the jury found Farrell guilty of manslaughter rather than murder. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison, which sounds pretty generous for someone who was initially accused of killing her boyfriend in cold blood. Thanks for watching. If you were dating someone new and their ex warned you about their jealous and controlling ways, would you heed their caution and end the new relationship, or write them off as a vengeful blast from the past? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.